In this exercise, we're going to finish off our text by applying a drop shadow, and I'll show you a very special consideration that you need to bear in mind. I've saved my progress as 8effecttype.ai, so called because we've now managed to amass 8 different dynamic effects on this single type object. 4 of them are applied directly to the object. The other 4 are applied one apiece to the 4 strokes. And that's a lot of stuff. That means every single one of those dynamic effects is interacting with each other. So transform is applied to 3D rotate, which is applied to one stroke, to another stroke, to the other, and so on throughout this effect. So that means that once we apply the drop shadow, that's going to make things that much more complicated. So if we didn't have all these other effects assigned, then the drop shadow would be no problem for Illustrator. Because all these other effects are assigned, it's going to take forever if we don't prepare things properly. We're going to get big delays. And so here's what I'm going to suggest. Go up to the Effect menu and choose Document Raster Effects Settings. Now, before I choose this command, let me explain what's going on here. A drop shadow is a raster effect. In other words, it's rendered out to pixels inside Illustrator. So any of the blurring effects work that way. That is, under the Stylize menu, we got drop shadow, feather, inner glow, and outer glow. All 4 of those commands are raster effects. They're rendered in pixels, as are all of the commands in this section of the effect menu, the Photoshop effects, which I don't use very often because I think they just complicate things. They slow down the program, especially when we have this much stuff going on. And they're rendered out at the Document Raster Effects Settings right here. So you have to specify the resolution at which these various raster settings are rendered. If you choose this command, because this was a print document, it's set to high 300 ppi, which means that the effects are going to look good. That's all right. However, it also means that they're going to take forever to apply on screen. They're going to be really super slow. You're better off choosing screen. Now, that may seem like a weird idea, but it's a great mode for working in. It's great to work at a low resolution when you're applying drop shadows and the like. And then, once you get done, once you finish up your illustration, you can come back to this command, bump it back up to high if you want to, and that way it'll render at a high resolution on screen. That's the problem. And it'll also print at a high resolution. But your drop shadows don't really need to be rendered at a high resolution, I'm telling you, because they're blurry effects. So whether you devote a few pixels to a blurry effect or a lot of pixels to a blurry effect, you're going to still get a very blurry effect. It may look a little choppier at screen resolution than it does at high resolution, but I doubt you're going to notice it much. So you may want to do some tests in that department. But anyway, you're really going to notice it on screen. So click OK. That is, things are going to be much speedier where the drop shadow is concerned. It doesn't affect anything we've done so far, because so far we haven't applied any pixel-based effects. Now, for some strange reason, when you apply that command, which affects all raster effects inside the document, by the way, we all of a sudden lose our attributes over here in the Appearance panel. We see mixed objects with mixed appearances, even though only one object is selected on screen. So you have to click off the object and click on it again to reselect it, and then everything comes back. So you didn't actually lose anything. It's just an interface hiccup. All right, at this point, what I want you to do is now go up to the Effect menu, choose Stylize, and choose Drop Shadow. If you loaded D keys, you've got a keyboard equivalent of Control-Alt-E, Command-Option-E on the Mac. That brings up the drop shadow dialog box. Here's the settings I want you to apply. You can turn on preview if you want to, but that's going to slow you down. So you might as well enter the settings first and then turn on the preview checkbox. Opacity 75% is fine. Mode, definitely set that to multiply. The color option should be selected, and that swatch should show black. So far so good. Change the X offset value to -3. That way you're going to move the shadow 3 points to the left. Remember, that's how negative values work. And then for X offset, I'll change that guy to 1 point. So 1 point down. And then finally, blur, we'll do 3 points. So just a little bit of a blur. Turn on the preview checkbox in order to see what happens. Watch the progress bars. Did you see those progress bars zip by? If we were working in a high resolution, they wouldn't have zipped by. They would have just took their sweet time on screen, and we would have waited for a good 5 to 10 seconds. Then click OK to apply the effect, and we end up with this drop shadow here. So we have this highly sculptural type that comprises all these beveling effects, as well as a 3D rotation, a little bit of a transform, some pucker and bloat, that early offset as well, and then finally the drop shadow is added at the very end of the process. Next, what we're going to do in the next exercise, that is, we're going to take all of these effects that we assign to this text and we're going to duplicate them onto the stars in one fell swoop.